Your body is fully rested. Your life is running on fumes. Jung identified the exact mechanism behind this. The exhaustion you carry is not about being tired. It is the tax levied by a psychological architecture your psyche built in childhood and never dismantled. You feel it before the day has even started. The self behind the mask is being buried alive by the weight of wearing it. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. The precise clinical mechanism behind why your body is refusing to participate in your own life. Why the guilt that floods you the moment you sit down is not a character flaw, but a childhood survival program still running at 50. Why your growing desire to be left alone is not depression, but a biological mandate your psyche has been trying to deliver for years, and the part that does not surface until the third stage of this collapse. The same armor that saved you in the first half of your life is now the structure consuming you from the inside. What happened is simpler and more terrifying. You outgrew the armor, and your exhaustion is the proof. You are not losing your drive. Your unconscious has recognized that the war is over, and it is forcing you to take off the armor. There are two exhaustions, and the entire medical establishment treats them as one. The first is physical. You know it well. You fix it with sleep, with movement, with better food, with the supplement your friend recommended. It responds to rest. It has a logic. But the second kind does not respond to any of that. You eat well, you exercise, you sleep 8 hours, and you are still tired. Not sleepy. Tired. And the distinction is everything. Sleepy is a body asking for recovery. Tired is a self asking to stop performing. Jung identified this with a precision that modern psychology still has not caught up to. He understood that every person builds what he called a persona, a psychological mask designed to meet the demands of the outer world. This adaptation is not fake, it is necessary. But he warned that through it, individuals try to appear as this or that, and the danger is that they become identical with the role. Here is what that means in plain language. The person you became at 35, the one who could handle anything, who never asked for help, who said yes when the answer should have been no, who held the room together by sheer force of competence, that person was a construction. A brilliant one, necessary. It got you through 2 decades of demands that would have broken someone with less resilience. But maintaining that construction requires energy, massive, continuous, invisible energy. Your psyche has to suppress every impulse that contradicts it. Every time you swallow the honest answer and replace it with, "I'm fine," your nervous system spends fuel. Every time you perform engagement in a meeting where you cannot locate the part of yourself that used to care, your body pays a tax. And you have been paying that tax for 20 years without a single audit. You wake up at 6:47 and the tiredness is already there. Not the tiredness of a body that did not sleep, the tiredness of a self that knows before it has opened its eyes exactly how many performances are required before it can close them again. You shower, you dress, you commute. You sit in a meeting and say the right things at the right moments, and a part of you watches the performance from somewhere behind your eyes and wonders when you started doing this on autopilot. You used to care. You remember caring. You cannot locate the moment the caring stopped and the performing began. But the gap between them has become the defining feature of your interior life. The 59 people who like to comment in the original research for this video said it perfectly. "I'm fine" saves us an exhausting conversation about how we have tried all the suggestions you're about to be told to try if you say you are tired. That comment has more clinical precision in it than most therapy intake forms. The performance is not just emotional protection, it is energy protection. Explaining the depth of what you are carrying to someone who has not lived it costs more than the exhaustion itself. So you keep the front intact because dropping it is, paradoxically, more draining than maintaining it. You are whole on the outside, broken on the inside, and the gap between those two states is where all your energy goes. If that gap is something you carry every single day but have never heard anyone name out loud, write this in the comments. Not sleepy, tired. Because that distinction is not a complaint. It is a diagnosis. But the adaptation that secures your survival in the morning of life becomes a suffocating, energy-draining prison by the afternoon. And the proof shows up every single weekend. Take someone like David, 51, project manager. 2 decades of quiet, reliable competence. He describes his weekdays as a fog he drives through on autopilot. He gets to Friday and expects relief. Relief never arrives. Instead of collapsing into rest, he paces. He organizes things that do not need organizing. He cannot sit down without a creeping sensation that he is wasting something, losing momentum, falling behind on a task he cannot even name. By Saturday at noon, his shoulders finally drop. For about 4 hours, he exists in a version of himself that feels almost familiar. Then the Sunday dread begins. Not anxiety about a specific meeting or a specific deadline. A deeper, less articulable contraction. His body starts reassembling the mask before Monday has arrived. This is not burnout in the clinical sense. This is something more precise. The role, that competent, reliable, unflappable version of David that his workplace requires, consumes all available psychic energy during the week. He called this energy libido, and he did not mean it sexually. He meant it as the total available fuel the psyche has for living. Every role you play, every mask you maintain, every obligation you meet without genuine internal agreement draws from that same finite well. When that performance drops on the weekend, the energy does not simply flow back into rest, it floods into the space the role was occupying. And what fills that space is not peace, it is everything the persona was suppressing. The anxiety, the unnamed grief, the low-grade terror that the life you built might not actually be the life you want. The front held all of that at bay, and the moment the demand lifts, the dam breaks. That is why David paces through his weekends. That is why you do too. And here is the version of this paradox that nobody is talking about. Some of you experience the exact opposite. You are functional at work, you are competent, engaged, present. Then Friday evening arrives and your body simply collapses. You sleep 12 hours on Saturday. You cancel plans. You lie on the couch and stare at a screen you are not watching and feel a bone-deep shame about wasting the only free hours you have. Both versions point to the same union mechanism. The persona is consuming all available libido. In version 1, David's body rebels against the role during the week and springs to life when it drops. In version 2, the performance is consuming so much energy that the moment the demand lifts, the body simply shuts down. One version is the psyche rebelling, the other is the psyche collapsing. Both are proof that the life and the soul have separated. The exhaustion is not the problem, the exhaustion is the symptom. The problem is that you are spending 5 days a week being someone, and 2 days a week either fighting or recovering from who you actually are underneath. This is the cruel efficiency of the adaptation. It protects you from the world, but it also protects you from yourself. And your weekends are the only window where the protection fails. And the reason you cannot simply take a vacation to cure this Sunday dread leads us to the darkest corner of your own childhood conditioning. You try to rest. You know you need to rest. You sit down on a Saturday afternoon with nothing scheduled, nothing urgent, nothing demanding your attention. And within 90 seconds, the guilt arrives. Not guilt about something specific. A diffuse, heavy, almost physical sensation that you are failing. That sitting still is evidence of laziness. That a day with nothing accomplished is a day wasted. You know this is irrational. You can articulate exactly why rest is necessary, and your body overrides the logic every single time. This did not start in adulthood. This was installed before you had the vocabulary to refuse it. You were the child who came home to an empty house. You learned to feed yourself, manage yourself, soothe yourself, solve your own problems, because the adults in the system were either absent or overwhelmed. That independence everyone later praised you for was not a character trait. It was a survival response to a household that could not afford to have a child with needs. And what your developing nervous system learned from that arrangement was catastrophically simple. Having needs is dangerous. Asking for help means being a burden. Stillness means vulnerability. And vulnerability in the house you grew up in was not safe. The shadow, in Jungian terms, is not your darkness. The shadow is everything you were forced to repress. For a generation raised on self-sufficiency, the shadow contains something astonishing. It contains your capacity to receive, your ability to rest without utility, your permission to need something from another person without earning it first. The inner child who learned at 7 that needing help was weakness is now the inner critic who punishes you at 51 for taking a Saturday off. You cannot rest because your nervous system perceives a day with nothing accomplished as an existential threat, not a preference, a threat. Your body responds to stillness the way it would respond to danger, because in the house you grew up in, stillness and danger were the same thing. This is why the vacation does not work. This is why the long weekend leaves you more drained than the work week. You are not resting. You are fighting your own survival programming for permission to stop, and the program is winning. The reason this matters right now, and this is the part that demands your attention, is that the next decade is the window where this pattern either calcifies into chronic illness or gets interrupted. Every circuit that protected you at 7 is actively destroying you at 50. Cortisol that kept you alert in an unpredictable household is now eroding your sleep architecture, your immune response, your cardiovascular resilience. Hypervigilance that made you the person who noticed everything before anyone else did is now the reason your body cannot distinguish between a Sunday morning and a Monday crisis. Your survival system never received the message that the danger is over. It is still scanning, still bracing, still burning fuel against a threat that ended decades ago, but was never formally discharged. The window has not closed, but it is closing. This is the threshold. Because the guilt never dissolves by understanding where it came from. It dissolves by building a structure that is stronger than the program it needs to replace. Because your nervous system refuses to let you rest, you are forced into an inescapable structural trap that is currently destroying your generation from both ends. You keep moving because stopping is intolerable, and the direction you move is outward. You pour your energy into the people who need you, because caring for others is the one form of activity your nervous system does not punish you for. It feels productive. It feels necessary. It feels like the opposite of the selfish stillness your inner critic will not allow. So you hold the aging parent who is losing memory, losing independence, losing the version of themselves you grew up believing was permanent. You hold the adult child who cannot find their footing, who still calls you for guidance you are not sure you have anymore but deliver anyway, because you always have. You hold the job. You hold the household. You hold the emotional infrastructure of every relationship you are in, because you have always been the one who holds. The sandwich generation, that is the clinical name for this position. Caring for parents above you and children below you while occupying the load-bearing center of a system that depends entirely on your capacity to keep functioning. You need to create boundaries. You know this intellectually. You have read the articles, you have heard the advice, but the moment you try to set one, the math collapses. If you stop managing your mother's medications, who does it? If you stop being available for the adult child who calls at 11 at night with a crisis that is not quite a crisis, who answers? The boundaries are not the problem. The problem is that every boundary you set reveals a gap in the system, and the gap is U-shaped and no one else is stepping into it. And you know with a quiet terror you have told almost no one that something will break soon. You can feel it, the way an engineer feels a bridge under too much load. Not a dramatic collapse, a slow, quiet failure that has already begun. You have said it to yourself in the shower, in the car, in the middle of the night when the house is finally quiet. Something will break. You just do not know yet whether it will be your body, your marriage, your mind, or the carefully maintained fiction that you are handling all of this. And then one day, the person upstream of you vanishes. A parent dies, and you expect, in some private guilty chamber of your mind, that the exhaustion will ease. One less person to hold, one less direction to pour. The weight does not ease, it intensifies. And the reason is not the grief, though the grief is real and enormous. The reason is architectural. You are now the ceiling. There is no one to fall back on, no one who remembers you as a child, no one who holds any part of the weight from above. You step into the shoes of the person you lost, and you keep running, because the system demands it, and because stopping, as we already established, triggers the same alarm your nervous system has been running since childhood. But when the last person upstream of you vanishes, something foundational shifts in the psyche. This is what he understood as the confrontation with mortality, the individuation threshold that arrives when the protective buffer of the elder generation is removed. You are forced to become your own inner parent, not symbolically, functionally. The identity you have been constructing since childhood, someone's child, someone's responsibility, someone who has a ceiling above them, collapses. And in its place is a terrifying open sky. This is the exact moment the healing begins. Not because the grief resolves, not because the burden lifts, because the illusion that someone else was ultimately responsible for your life has finally, permanently ended. And with that ending, a question arrives that you have never had the structural space to ask. If no one is coming to relieve you, then who are you when you stop performing for the system that was supposed to reward you? But the moment you accept that no one is upstream to save you, the entire psychological scaffolding of your life collapses, clearing the way for a completely different kind of freedom. You stop caring. Not all at once, in stages. The obligations that used to animate you now feel like theater. The social events you used to attend because you were supposed to now cost more than they return. You develop a growing misanthropy that shocks you because you were never like this. You mostly just want to be left alone. You fantasize about a cabin, a small town, a life with fewer faces and fewer demands. You do not want to escape your life. You want to escape the performance your life requires. And you assume you are becoming bitter. You assume the exhaustion has finally eroded your personality. You tell yourself something is wrong with you because the world keeps moving and you no longer feel any urgency to move with it. You compare yourself to the version you were at 35, and you cannot find her. You look for the ambition, the stamina, the almost reckless willingness to say yes. It is gone, and its absence feels like a failure rather than what it actually is. Here is what no one is telling you. In any context, what you are experiencing is the most important psychological transition of your life. Jung wrote about this with a precision that borders on prophecy. He said that aging people should know that their lives are not mounting and expanding, but that an inexorable inner process enforces the contraction of life. He said that after having lavished its light upon the world, the sun withdraws its rays in order to illuminate itself. Let that land. The first half of life is expansion. You adapt to the world's demands. You build the persona. You acquire the roles, the career, the relationships, the identity that the outer world requires. And for decades, that expansion feels like progress. What follows is contraction, not decline. Contraction. The psyche stops expanding outward and turns inward. The values that drove the first half, achievement, approval, endurance, self-sacrifice, begin to lose their charge. Not because you failed at them, because you succeeded. You climb the mountain the culture told you to climb, and at the summit, you discovered that the view is not what sustains you. He called this the transvaluation of values. The traits that made you successful in the morning are the exact traits that are poisoning you in the afternoon. The hyper-independence that got you through the latchkey years is now the locked door between you and the rest you need. The competence that built your career is now the role consuming your remaining energy. The self-sacrifice that held the family together is now the chain keeping you in a burning building. The apathy you feel toward your old obligations is not a malfunction. It is the deliberate, necessary destruction of your previous value system. The unconscious is forcefully defunding the life you built. Not because the life was wrong, because the life was a vehicle, and you have arrived at the place it was designed to reach. You do not keep driving after you have arrived. You get out of the car. The sudden desire to be left alone is individuation's demand for solitude, the necessary withdrawal that allows the inward turn to begin. The growing inability to tolerate superficiality is your perception clearing, not your personality decaying. The friends who no longer feel nourishing are not the ones who changed. You changed. Your tolerance for performing connection instead of experiencing it has reached zero, and your body will no longer subsidize relationships that cost more than they return. This is not selfishness. This is the psyche renegotiating every contract you signed before you knew who you were. You are not losing your drive. Your unconscious has recognized that the war is over, and it is forcing you to take off the armor. You came here because you have been carrying something that has no name in the vocabulary you were given. You were told it was burnout. You were told it was aging. You were told to sleep more, supplement more, push through more, and none of it reached the actual wound. The exhaustion was never physical, it was architectural. The cost of maintaining a persona that your psyche has outgrown. The tax on a nervous system still running survival software from a childhood that ended 30 years ago. The grief of becoming the ceiling when the person above you disappeared. And the terrifying, beautiful demand of a soul that is done performing and ready finally to contract inward towards something that is actually yours. Society will tell you this withdrawal is a midlife crisis. It is not. It is individuation. The process Jung spent his entire career mapping. The psyche's demand that you stop building outward and start excavating inward. The heavy exhaustion you carry will lift, but not through more sleep, not through a vacation, not through forcing yourself to care about things your soul has already released. It will lift the day you accept its message, not as a defeat, as a permission. Jung wrote that for the aging person, it is a duty and a necessity to devote serious attention to himself, not a luxury, a duty. The culture you were raised in told you that attending to yourself was selfish. He says the opposite. He says that avoiding this inward turn is the real pathology. That the person who tries to live the afternoon according to the program of the morning pays for it with damage to the soul. You have been paying for it. The exhaustion is the invoice. Let people be disappointed. Let the ceiling fall if you are the only one holding it up. Stop apologizing for the parts of you that have stopped caring about what used to matter. They are not dying. They are clearing the ground for the parts of you that are ready, for the first time in decades, to actually live. The question worth sitting with, the one I would ask you to leave in the comments, is this: how old are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how exhausted do you feel? And when did you first notice it was not physical? Jung-based boundary drills, perception training for empaths, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. 236 pages. Downloadable now at thesurrealmind.com.